Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Credit Counseling Society's webinar, Making Sense of Money, Budgeting 101. My name is Graham Hiscox, and I have the pleasure of being a partnership and education specialist with the Credit Counseling Society. So let's begin. Before we get into the bulk of the presentation, which will run about 45 minutes today, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the Credit Counseling Society's history and some of the work that we do. We are a nonprofit organization, and our motto is, we help, we educate, we give hope. So how do we help people? Well, if you're in a situation of financial distress, maybe you have a lot of debt that has accumulated and you're trying to address it on your own, but you need some help, what you can do is give us a call and speak with one of our credit counselors absolutely free of charge. So that, in a nutshell, is how we help people. And what the credit counselor will do is they will go through a variety of no cost and low cost debt solutions for you to help you get out of that situation that you find yourself in. We also have an education arm to the work that we do. We put on workshops and webinars just like this one on a variety of different financial literacy topics, everything from budgeting, of course, to investing, to retirement planning. So there's something for everybody. And I invite you to visit our website, nomoredebts.org, and register for one of our public webinars. We also have as part of our motto, an aspect of giving hope to people. And that really is what keeps us excited about the work that we do and very proud of the work that we do. And I've had the pleasure of listening in on a couple of client conversations, with their permission, of course. And I've noticed that when someone is in financial distress, you can hear it in their voice. Maybe they are tripping over their own words. Maybe there's some rapid breathing, but you can just hear the tension in their vocal cords. And by the end of the first hour with one of our credit counselors, they undergo a transformation. And in some cases, they literally breathe a sigh of relief. I remember one gentleman remarking, "I finally feel like I can sleep at night." So we help people with their money, we educate them and give them the tools they need to achieve financial wellness, but most importantly, we give them hope. We are 28 years young, and over our history, we've helped about 1 million people repay approximately $750 million of debt. I've got here some reasons why someone might find themselves in financial hardship. I won't go through each of these, but what I will identify is that number 4 is especially pertinent to us today because a lot of folks, about half of all Canadians in fact, do not have a budget. So by viewing this webinar, you're taking the right steps to ensure that you've got the financial literacy in place and the tools you need to succeed financially. For our agenda today, we're going to talk about a few different things. Budgeting, of course, but also looking at money values and goal setting, touching a little bit on expense tracking and how that's really the key ingredient to making a budget work, the different expenses that you might encounter, irregular, emergency, and savings, and then ending off with a bit about paycheck planning. So my hope is that by the end of the session, you'll be able to reflect on your money values and goals. You'll know how to achieve your financial priorities. We'll have talked about those different expenses, and we'll be able to create and organize a savings plan for you. So what comes to mind when you hear the word budget? For us, a budget really is just a written spending plan. And the point is finding a way for you to be able to spend now while saving up so you can continue to spend later. And this is ultimately based on our priorities. So I invite you to reflect on what would being better with your priorities look like for you. For different people, it can mean different things, but of course, among them is reduced stress, better sleep, better control of your money, and then finally, hope. There are certain aspects to budgeting that we want to touch on today, and of course, chief among them is our take-home or our net pay. When you draft a budget, you want to make sure that any income you're using is net of taxes, so after you pay taxes. And then, of course, you've got your monthly living expenses, could be your rent, your mortgage. Then there are irregular expenses. Those are costs that you incur every now and again, maybe not the same day or the same dollar amount, but fairly frequently. Could be buying groceries, could be putting gas in your vehicle. Those are irregular expenses. Next, we have emergency expenses. We're going to talk about short-term and long-term emergencies before we shift to savings goals, both short-term and long-term. Another chance to reflect here. What does money mean to you? Another way of looking at this is, what does having money mean to you? And this really comes back to your money values. So for some people, having money might mean safety and security. For others, it might be the ability to have enough that you can give back and serve your community. For others, it could be adventure. A lot of people say they like to travel. So money really comes back to the values that are important to you. And when you're embarking on an exercise of budgeting, it makes the numbers on your spreadsheet or on your piece of paper or wherever you have them written down much more meaningful. And it makes the exercise a lot more important because it's ultimately not just about dollars and cents. It's about getting to live the life you've always wanted to live and how we can budget for that. Goals guide your decisions and help you know how to spend your money. So when you're setting goals, the information you need includes what the goal is, how much it's going to cost, and the time frame it's going to take to achieve that goal. We've got a great acronym here on the next slide called SMART, and it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. We've got an example on the next slide here as to what that might look like. So let's say your goal is you want to go on a vacation. You want to achieve this in 18 months. The cost of the goal is $1,500. So that means you're going to have to set aside $84 a month or $38 biweekly. So the key here is to get really detailed, really specific with your goal and to break down exactly how much you're going to need to set aside, however frequently, so that way you can work backward and ensure that when you're budgeting, you're putting aside the amount that you need to reach your financial goal. I've got some goal setting tips here for you. As we were mentioning before, make sure your goal is very clear, but also when you're setting goals, understand that they're going to change. Your financial goals when you're a young adult are going to look very different than when you're a little older and maybe looking forward to retirement. If you can, we want to encourage you to make your savings automatic, pay yourself first. So set up automatic transfers between your different accounts for your different goals. And that brings us to our next point. We encourage you to set up different savings accounts at your financial institution for each different goal that you have. So if you like to go travel, you might have a vacation fund called Sun and Sand, and you might set up an automatic transfer from your main account, which could be your checking account, into that savings account to ensure you're putting money aside, building toward that goal. Only thing you want to watch out for is the fees that could be associated with setting up those different accounts. Okay, let's talk about expense tracking. Do you know where your money went last month? When it comes to expense tracking, it's the key part of making a budget work. What you'll find is that it becomes second nature after a while. Practice becomes habit. It will help you identify your spending habits and really what kind of a spender you are. It'll help you see where there might be room for you to change your spending habits so you can more easily meet your financial goals. And you'll notice that control becomes confidence. The more you do this, the better a sense you'll have that you have control over your finances. There are many different ways to track your expenses. All of them are valid, but we've got a few different ideas here. A lot of people these days use smartphone apps, and one of the main questions we get asked is, which app is the best one to use? The most helpful answer I can give you is that the best app is the one that you are using. As long as you are engaging in the process of expense tracking, it doesn't matter which app you use or even which method you use. As long as you put in the work, you're on the right track. What are some expenses that come up once in a while? These, of course, are irregular expenses. We've got some examples here of some irregular expenses you might encounter in your life, but if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, what we've done is we've added these up to give us an annual total of how much we might be spending on this category. So how do we manage our irregular expenses? Once again, we're going to want to open up a new bank account, could be a new savings account, for example. Add up the total cost of our annual irregular expenses. We'll do a bit of quick math to find out the monthly total or biweekly total. And then, of course, we're going to set up those automatic transfers between our different bank accounts and ensure that the correct amount is deposited into the new account. And what this will let us do is track the ins and outs and have a great handle on our finances. So we have an example here. As we saw before, we had $3,000 in annual irregular expenses. That works out to $250 a month or $160 per biweekly paycheck. What about emergency expenses? Those can be even harder to plan for. With emergencies, we don't know when they will occur, what they will be, or how much they're going to cost us. For the short term, we encourage you to have $1,000 set aside. Now, that's not going to cover all of your emergencies, but it is a good place to start from and to think about how you can tackle something that could be an emergency in a way where you're taking it from being an emergency to being an inconvenience. Some people say, well, this is all fine and good, but I don't have $1,000. Can you put aside $20 a week for a year? That will get you to just over that $1,000 mark. A longer term expense, if it's an emergency, is harder to plan for. We recommend that you aim for 3 to 6 months of income or expenses, whichever is greater. And the reason why we recommend this time frame is because in our experience, this is about how long it takes someone, if they should lose their job, to find a new role. How can we keep our savings safe from ourselves? Some of the ideas we have for you include removing any ATM or debit access to your savings account. Most, if not all of you, are probably aware that when you open up a bank account, it comes with a checking and a savings account. We normally have debit and ATM access to our checking account, but we don't need this same access to our savings account. So if you're presented with the option of having this access to your savings, you can absolutely decline it. You could also have an account with no debit card, so money can only go in and not come out. This would require you to go into the bank branch or a credit union branch to withdraw your money. You could also look into having a joint account with someone you trust. The beauty of having a joint account is that you can't access the money without the consent of all parties who are joint on the account. So that way you have at least one accountability partner. You're accountable to someone besides yourself for what happens in the account. You could have an automatic transfer set up as well. This is a one-time setup, and thereafter, the money would be moved from your checking account into your savings account on the date that you've specified without your having to move the money manually every time. We recommend having the transfer date coincide with payday or just a few days after to ensure that the money is there to be moved in the first place, and so that way you won't incur any NSF or non-sufficient fund fees. You could even look into a top-up or round-up option where your purchase gets rounded up to the nearest dollar and the amount used to round up your purchase goes into a savings account. Now, you might be wondering what a few cents here and there can do for you per purchase. I'll put it this way. If you were to fill up a 2-liter pop bottle with dimes, you would have saved approximately $700. So I assure you, every little bit counts. Another strategy to consider would be the 40-40-20 rule, which is especially useful if you receive a lump sum of money, whether it's from a bonus at work, a really good tax return, or an inheritance of some kind. Essentially, if you receive a lump sum of money, the 40-40-20 rule recommends that 40% of it go into your savings, 40% goes toward your debt, and 20% goes towards something fun. So this way, you're keeping up with adding to your savings while also paying down your debts and allowing yourself to live a little and to actually enjoy your money. There's also the 52-week money challenge. You could even reverse the order of it so that you start with $52 in savings and end with the $1. But in essence, what you're doing is you're putting aside a little bit of money each week, starting with $1 on the first week and then $2 on the second week. And so by the end of the year, you've saved a total of $1,378. And the most you've ever put aside is $52 that one week. There is also what's known as the bingo method, which is where you pick and choose numbers out of a hat and maybe you put that side amount for that week. Okay, let's talk about paycheck planning. Something that can help you with maintaining a consistent savings system is a paycheck plan. Keep in mind that we have three types of expenses: fixed expenses like rent or mortgage, variable expenses, which are regular expenses, but the amounts and dates of the expenditure change, like groceries or gas, and savings expenses, like those irregular expenses we talked about, emergencies, and goal savings. We learned about the savings expenses earlier. Now we have to categorize all of these types of expenses. You could start with separate bank accounts for each of these categories. Keep in mind that while there's no limit to the number of bank accounts you can have at any given financial institution, there may be some fees and service charges associated with that. So just keep an eye on those. Now that we've looked at all the different parts that go into creating a workable budget, we need to get this written down somewhere. This budget is based on a household income of $3,170 a month. One more layer to add to your budget is to plan your paychecks, to spread your money across the month, and avoid any fees from your bank. By using separate bank accounts and keeping your variable expense spending separate from your fixed expenses, it makes it easier to manage. Some people also find variable expenses easier to manage over a shorter period of time. Another strategy I've heard of is to use 3 different highlighters to categorize the types of expenses you might have listed out for yourself. So what we're seeing here on this slide is an example of how to organize a monthly paycheck. If you get paid bi-weekly, then you want to be dividing these numbers by 2. We've got an example here of how you could divide up and spread out your paycheck into various accounts, and what it might look like when you've got one account for fixed expenses, one for variable expenses, one for irregular, one for emergency savings, and 2 goal savings accounts for different types of goals that you might have. The last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up are strategies around cutting back on credit. In an ideal world, you're staying on top of your spending plan and your financial priorities. My hope is that you'd have cash on hand to pay for all of your expenses. If you want to cut back on using credit, there are still ways to get by, even though it may feel like we have grown increasingly reliant on digital currency, especially with all the online shopping so many of us are doing these days. So, option 1 is a Visa debit or MasterCard debit option. This option lets you use the money you have, and you don't have to borrow from your credit card. Prepaid credit cards are good too. It's important to note that these are not the same as Visa gift cards. Also, if you do have a prepaid credit card option through your bank, we recommend going through them first. If not, Koho is a Canadian prepaid Visa company, and Stack is a prepaid MasterCard company with no foreign exchange rate. So it might be a good option for anyone wanting to do some traveling. It's important to note too that because Koho and Stack are not financial institutions, they have no deposit insurance. Deposit insurance is meant to protect you if a financial institution goes bankrupt, and because they are not financial institutions, there are no fees in general for obtaining prepaid cards from either company. Next, with regard to a secured credit card, the financial institution that you are getting the card from will ask you to deposit the equivalent of the card limit into an account. They will hold and release this deposit only when they feel that you can manage. This may entail doing a credit check on you. Unlike the other options presented on this list, a secured credit card will be reported to the credit bureau, so please make sure that you know your responsibilities on these well before committing to one. Finally, we have PayPal, e-transfers, gift cards, and cash. And they're all just ways for you to spend outside of the credit card system. So your next steps. By no means do you have to do all of these suggested next steps, especially if this is your first time dabbling in any kind of financial planning for yourself. But if there's one thing I would encourage you to do, it would be to get clear on what your financial priorities are and create that spending plan. And if you need help with this, please call us. Your credit counselors are more than happy to assist you with this. Part of creating or revisiting your list of financial priorities and your spending plan is going to include planning for irregular expenses and creating an emergency fund. Once you are clear on what your priorities are and have your spending plan ready to go, consider revising them every 6 months to start, and then maybe every 3 to 4 months afterward. Then, if you feel ready, start tracking your expenses. Maybe even just once a month until you are really on top of it, outside of any big life changes. We've got some free tools and resources for you through our sister website, mymoneycoach.ca, and I encourage you to check that in your own due time. So my hope is that at this point, you're feeling encouraged to reflect on your money values and your goals. We've learned how to achieve our financial priorities. We've looked at irregular, emergency, and savings expenses, and we now know how to create and organize our savings. We have some contact information here for you, a variety of ways to get in touch with us at the Credit Counseling Society. And we have entered the world of social media, so if you'd like to give us a like or a follow, we encourage you to do so. That wraps up our Budgeting 101 webinar. Thank you very much for your time and attention.